There we go. Hey everybody, welcome back to Our Lady of Lourdes. We're here today with Lisa Cotter. Lisa's a well-known speaker across the United States. You have been married how many years?
It will be 15 this summer.
15 years. You are old.
Well, I got married when I was like 12,
Okay.
so
Yeah.
it wasn't that young, but
Yeah,
straight out of college.
I'm turning 30 this month, so.
Oh, that's perfect.
Yeah, so I'm a little older. But.
Mm-hmm.
So 15 years, you and Kevin.
Mm-hmm.
Kevin works with the Amazing Parish,
That's right.
doing great work, helping parishes do what they do better, organizational health and all those great things. You guys have 4 kids, I want to say.
That's right, yeah.
Yes. And
Yeah.
so Mary Claire is 12, 13.
13. Well, she's going to be a freshman next year, so she's almost 14.
Isn't that amazing how life just goes so fast?
Yeah.
Amazing. And so you and Kevin wrote a book called Dating Detox.
Yes.
You've done podcasting. I know you speak at focus conferences and different events across the country. How'd you get involved in all that kind of ministry?
Oh, that's an interesting story. It was never my plan.
Yeah.
I thought I'd get married, like getting married straight out of college. I thought we'd have like 75 kids and I just would homeschool, you know. But God had totally different plans. We ended up in Focus, and long story short, I gave a talk at a Focus conference just as a staff spouse. Like,
Yeah.
I think I got like a $35 thank you card. Like,
Yes.
thanks for giving the breakout. It was,
That's probably more than you'll get here.
that's okay. That's okay. But the talk, it was an interesting talk. It was just to men. And anytime a female speaks just to men, they're like, whatever you say, please, thank you. Like, thank you for being here. So the talk apparently went well enough that Lighthouse Catholic Media picked it up, turned it into a CD. So it's sitting in the back of churches, and I start getting phone calls like, can you speak at our event?
Awesome.
I'm like, I don't really do that, but I guess I could. So just
What
kind of
was that talk on?
It was called Why Do Women Do That?
Okay.
Yeah, it was just basically on understanding kind of the emotional side of women and
Okay.
how that plays into relationships. And
Yeah, that's important.
yeah, very important.
I mean, I find that we're not going to talk about this today, but even hopefully in the future we'll do that one. But I just think with all the marriage prep I do, it's interesting because as a celibate priest, I'll get couples in my office. And I've learned over the years just from doing so much marriage prep.
Yeah, we do. We kind of filter things and process things similarly but different. And so it's important, I think, for guys to kind of understand, like, here's why she's acting this way, in general, right?
Right?
Yeah, so it was really fun talk. It was like 600 guys. I'd never really spoken before. They were like, we need a headshot. I was like, hey, Kevin, take a picture of me in the kitchen. Like, I don't have a headshot. So it was fun.
One quick story with that. We had, before I had become a seminarian studying for priesthood, my focus team that I was on was invited in North Dakota to a meeting of priests. And the bishop up there at the time, I think he wanted me to come because he wanted to recruit me to be a priest. But he said, bring your focus team. But we didn't know where we were going to. And we went to this mass, and it was all priests. And we were the only non-priests, and my 2 female teammates, they felt so uncomfortable.
I would be like,
yeah.
cool, but not cool.
Right. Well, that's a good kind of transition, right?
It goes right into what we're talking
about. It does, right? Yeah. So today, thanks for joining us. We're going to talk about living the liturgy at home, and we're going to get Lisa's kind of just ideas on that. And how do you integrate your home life with the church's life, and how do you bring that home? I wanted to start a little bit talking about what does that word even mean. We have, if you're watching this and maybe you're not used to the word, right? And we have 2 parts, right? You know the 2 parts?
Liturgy of the Word, right, and Liturgy of the Eucharist.
Yes, very good.
I passed the first one.
You passed. Yeah, good Catholic. But kind of a fun thing for me has been, as I've studied the Bible more, it's like, what do these words mean? Where do they come from? And liturgy comes from a Greek word, of course, as I always joke. If you haven't seen My Big Fat Greek Wedding, it is true. Everything comes from the Greek. Give me any word, I'll show you how it comes from the Greek. But liturgy is a Greek word, and it was one of the words for a public act, as our seminarian says. But it became specified to really mean a priestly act of worship. And so it came to mean an act of worship in the temple. And so there's a bunch of references in the New Testament to this, and I just wanted to point out 2 for people who are checking in. One is in Luke chapter 1. You have when Gabriel appears to Zechariah. So Gabriel goes to Zechariah in the temple. Zechariah is the father of John the Baptist. And everyone's waiting for Zechariah to come out of the temple. And when he comes out, he can't speak. And then Luke tells us that they stayed there until his time of liturgia, of liturgy, had ended. And so it's describing his priestly service in the temple. And there's a couple of others, but if you're a Bible nerd like I am, check out in Hebrews chapters 8 and 9, whoever wrote Hebrews talks about this. And then last thought, and I want to throw this to Lisa, is that one of my favorite things I think that both the Old Testament and the New Testament say is that it's important for us to have both. I think a Christian could say, why do I have to go to church? If I just love my family and I'm a good mom, why do I have to go to Mass on Sunday? Doesn't God just want me to love my family? And on the other side, I think you could have someone who says, well, yeah, I may not live perfectly with my family or in my life in the world, but I go to church and I pray while I'm there. And I think what you want to kind of help people do is bring those two worlds together.
Yeah.
Tell me if I'm wrong about that.
No, I think that's a great way to describe it.
Yeah, and I love that. I think in the idea, right, is that when we worship God, we have to do both those things. Right? We can only do it through Christ in the Mass, which is our liturgy. It's not the only part of the liturgy, but it's our main liturgy, is at Mass. But then we have to live that, right? Mm-hmm. And so tell me a little bit about, like, how you and Kevin, the Cotter household, what does that look like? And how do you kind of help your kids to say, this isn't just going to church on Sundays, but this is something we do at home?
Yeah, I think like the best way I can describe it is this idea of like trying to like breathe with the church. So like when the church is like, we're going to slow down, we slow down.
Mm-hmm.
When the church says we're going to celebrate, we celebrate. When the church says we're going to take a day of rest, like we're going to rest with the church. And so it's taking like everything that's happening at Mass and everything that's happening in our churches and mimicking that in our home. So Sunday isn't just like going to Mass. Sunday's a whole day. Like the Lord's Day is the Lord's Day. Right. Or Lent isn't just like, oh yeah, we don't say Alleluia right now, or it's purple. Like we actually put purple up in our house during Lent, which sounds super dorky, but we're really trying. I know it does.
I wasn't going to judge you.
It's okay. It's okay. I remember one of the first examples I saw this actually was at the Shree House. So when we were in college, Dr. Shree was a professor there when we were students, and I remember coming over and Beth had decorated their like Christmas tree. This was during Advent with pink and purple like bulbs, and I was like, she's such a dork. Like, why would you do that? Like, why would you decorate your house? And I have a whole bin in my basement now that is full of pink and purple bulbs. Like, right? So we're trying to show like, well, there's seasons in the church, and we want to breathe with that. We want to live with that because there's wisdom in the rhythm of the church. There's wisdom in our liturgical year, and we don't want to bypass that by it just being something we see on Sunday. But we want to actually enter into those seasons and really get the benefit from it.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. It makes me think of like, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Kansas City.
Kansas City. Because it makes me think of, is it this way in Kansas? And one of the things I love about Colorado is that we have the seasons.
Yeah. Right?
And I always think like, part of me always says, when I get burned out a little bit at the parish and the needs are very high, I always say, I'm going to move to Telluride or to Hawaii, and I'm just going to sit on the beach and get a dog and whatever, have margaritas.
It'll be 80 degrees every day.
Yeah. Right? And I do think there's something, right, that in Colorado, like when spring comes, and we're kind of moving more into summer now, but after the wintertime, there's just something, spring is, it's a miracle, right? And I think there's that contrast. And do you think there's something like that with the church's seasons?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's an ebb and a flow. And it's a beautiful thing to put yourself in a position where you're actively going through. I mean, if you live the cycle, like the year, well, like for catechesis in the home, you hit everything that your kids need to know. If you just live that year well 1 year. Like they learn everything from like the birth of Jesus, because we do the Jesse tree during Advent, right? And then you're learning about like Jesus's death and resurrection during Lent, and then in Easter we focus really on heaven and like what's to come, what is our hope, like what were we created for, like what's next. And then you learn ordinary time. Like, life isn't always Christmas. Like,
Right.
sometimes it's just kind of being faithful in the mundane, and that's part of showing our love. And so you see all that, and then you learn on top of that, like, all the saints, all those feast days. You're learning, it's all there. If you celebrate Saturdays, focusing on Mary, you're learning about
Right.
Mary. I mean, you get it all.
Now, what about, let me ask this, I have a couple questions, but, so first of all, like, tell me about Sunday. So, I know in my life, like, I made a decision coming out of college that I would, and when you become a priest, right, you just feel like you're in studies for, give or take, a couple years, but eternity. But I made a decision very consciously not to study on Sundays,
Mm-hmm.
and it changed my life.
Mm-hmm.
And as a priest, obviously, like, there's some element of work in the Mass on Sunday, but it's a day of worship, and I feel very renewed on Sundays. But I think a lot of families, I talk about this in our CIA, like, hey, you've got to treat Sunday differently. You've got to say no to the world. This is God's day. It doesn't belong to consumerism and other things. But I just imagine that's got to be tough as a family. So, like,
And we were taught in college, and I was part of a community, we were in Focus,
mm-hmm.
like, Sunday is a day of rest. And so I feel very grateful that that's just been a part of my rhythm for almost 20 years now, is this idea of, like, Sunday's the Lord's Day. So in our house, we don't work. I mean, obviously don't go to work, but I don't do laundry on Sunday. We don't go grocery shopping on Sunday. We don't do yard work. Like, Sunday is family day of rest. And so one of the simplest ways we teach the kids from a very young age is we have this thing called Sunday cereal. And, like, that's the only time you can eat the Cinnamon Toast Crunch and the Lucky Charms. Like, it's Sunday cereal. And the kids will ask on feast days, they'll bring it to me and be like, can I have Sunday cereal? I'm like, well, it is a solemnity, I guess. So, like, they know. It's such a simple thing, but, like, just from the get-go, we try to make sure they know, like, Sunday is special. And so we don't work on that day. We have our Sunday cereal. We always have dessert on Sunday.
Yep.
And that's our family day. That's, if we're going to go on a hike, we don't go on Saturday, because Saturday is yard work day. That's grocery store day. That's laundry day if we need to catch up, but not Sunday. Like, Sunday from sundown to sundown.
Yeah.
That's sacred. And so even our kids, like, schoolwork, Mary Claire just graduated 8th grade. She would come to me on Sunday night and be like, hey, it's after dinner, it's about 7, do you think I can do some homework now? Like, and that was ingrained in her already, that, Sundays set aside, that's when we're going to do family read alouds, that's when we're going to, we try to not just spend the whole day on screens, like, but actually do something together that's life-giving, true leisure, which I know you know all about, you talk about, that's our day for leisure as a family.
Yeah, that's awesome. And do you think, I think sometimes when we live in these things and we get in our habits, sometimes we don't even recognize what an impact it's had on us. But I mean, like with your kids, do you see that in them? Do you see, like, the impact that taking that rest has?
I think so, yeah. They need permission to slow down, to not feel like they have to be doing schoolwork or doing some kind of a sporting event or whatever it is. Like, we won't do sports if it requires them to do something on Sunday. If that's, like, the weekly commitment. Now, once in a while, there might be something out of the ordinary if there's, like, tournament weekend or something, but it's not like every Sunday afternoon's a baseball practice. Like, we wouldn't sign up for that team.
Yeah.
And I think they need that. I know, and we had situations where maybe there's, like, travel over the weekend. If we miss our Sunday and we go back into the next week and we haven't had, like, a true day off, by, like, Wednesday and Thursday, everyone's kind of falling apart.
Yeah.
Like, we feel it as a family.
Right? No, I think that's so true. And, well, I know you guys are on the same page with this. I just think we're just so busy, Everybody just has so much going on. And you've, I'm sure, heard me say this, but I think the main thing that keeps people from God isn't, of course, like, our choices, and we choose things that are not in accordance with God's will, but I think we're just too busy.
Mm-hmm.
People just don't have room. There's no space in their life for God. And so Sunday, it's funny being a priest, because my day off as a priest is Monday.
Right.
And it's not the same. It's there. I really notice a difference that it's not Sunday, and you try your best, and you try to make that as much of a day apart and a day that is renewing. But there is the theology of Sunday, and just that Christ rose on that day, and He gave us the purpose of our whole life, and I don't know, there's just something different there.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would say to those two, I know that there are some circumstances where, like, if a dad's a youth minister, or
right.
you know, if mom's a nurse, and it's like, we need you to shift right now because of what's going on, or whatever it is. But picking that day, like, if we are traveling, let's say on a Sunday, like, we will try to float it to Monday if we can. We'll try to do something to make sure we have a down day that's going to be a family day.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, it's interesting because, like, it's in Matthew, end of chapter 11, when Jesus talks about how Sabbath was not made. How does he? I'm gonna say it backwards. You know, when people get things backwards.
Yeah, the man was not made for the Sabbath.
Right, when he says, man was made for, the Sabbath was not made for man, but man, I said it backwards. Sabbath was made for the sake of man. Mm-hmm. And I do think that's important, because I think sometimes people get a little scrupulous about it, where they think, oh my gosh, like, you know, I put the groceries away, is that a sin? You know, I think that can kind of miss the point, don't you think?
Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about, like, the seasons. So here's one that people debate about. Some of my priest friends debate this.
Okay.
So what is Advent? What is that like in the church's life?
Yeah.
Right?
Is it Lent light?
Yeah. Yeah, what do you think about that?
Yeah. You know, and I feel like as the years go on, we do tend to, like, fluctuate, like, how we live the seasons. You know, when the kids were really little, it looked different than it does now, just because the necessities of life, and, you know, as they grow, things change. For us, we always, during the 3 major seasons, so like Lent, Advent, and Easter, we try to make sure that we do, like, a family prayer time after dinner that's very intentional. So we do that during Lent, and we do the Jesse tree with them at home.
Okay. That's
and
cool.
Yeah, so it's neat because we're walking them through, you know, the story leading up. They'll see it sometimes at church, or they'll recognize it as we're going through the stories. They'll be like, oh, we just did that to make some kind of a sacrifice during Advent, but it's usually not necessarily fasting, but something that they're doing to help them remember they're in that season.
Right.
Because we don't want them, just like with Easter and Lent, like, there's a sense of, like, you can't feast without the fast, but, like, it's not, maybe fast isn't the right word for Advent necessarily, but, like, Christmas is going to mean so much more if we've prepared for it.
Right.
And so we try to make sure that we're doing what we can to not let it just become about my Christmas list and, you know, the presents and, like, the cookies and all that, but really trying to kind of think that through a little more intentionally and have it be a season of preparation that leads to Christmas. So Christmas isn't just like a letdown. Yeah. And then at Christmas, we try to actually live those 12 days. Like, we try to do something every day. And it's great because so many, like the Christmas light displays and things, they'll stay up through New Year's, but nobody goes to them. So if you wait and you go during Christmas season, it's amazing. Like, nobody's there. You have it all to yourself. And so we try to, as much as we can, save those things. But we also recognize we're not going to tell our kids, like, that's not liturgically correct or whatever. You know, it's like there's, like, a balance.
Makes me think of another Greek distinction. But there's, in the New Testament, there's different words for time. And just the way you're talking, I love this. Like, it makes me think of, the normal word for time is chronos. Have you seen The Incredibles?
Yes. Oh, is that where that comes
that's
from?
Like, yeah, like they're on, like, I think that's like the password or something is chronos. But that's a Greek word for time, and like the word chronology. Or when we say things are chronological, that's the Greek word for just normal time. And I think one of the things that happens to us as human beings is that the greatest evil, I think, in life is not suffering. I think it's meaninglessness. And who knows, Balthazar, Ratzinger, JP2, probably all of them talk about this, but it just made me think of it is that when our lives are like, it's Groundhog Day, when it's just one day after another, right? And coronavirus.
Same thing.
Right? Which is not from Kronos. It sounds like
but it could be.
It could be that Corona's for a crown, but anyway, but chronology sometimes, right? It's like time gets reduced to, like, and I think as adults, like you and Kevin could probably say this, like, what do? I get up every day, I do the same things, I go to work, you know, I take care of the kids, I take the kids to school, and I know I feel this sometimes of it's just one day after another. But in the New Testament, the other word for time in like Galatians 4:4 is kairos. And kairos means it's time that has meaning and it's sacred. And I think the liturgical year, just listening to you talk about that, I mean, that's something I would say, like, man, I hope the Cotter kids, that's an effect of that. That you grow up and you say, this isn't just one day after another, but time is actually sacred. That's like, I mean, like, that's actually pretty profound, right? I mean, that's like, that's profound stuff.
Yeah, I do hope that for them. I do hope that we're building traditions in them that stick with them. And so when they go to college, it's, to them, being Catholic isn't just, I have to go to Mass on Sunday.
Our other topic.
Yeah.
Do you know what, so in the seminary, there's a phrase where you say, Valentine's Day in the seminary is like Father's Day at the orphanage. And that's really bad.
That's really sad.
It's really bad. But one of the guys when I was in seminary used to say that. But those feast days, I just love that idea though of meaning, right? Like, and I think men and women today need to hear this so deeply, and I think for parents, for you out there, right? Like, this isn't just about your kids; this is about you.
Oh yeah.
And I think as we as adults go through life, I think all of us have that temptation of like, is there anything more? Am I just kind of like one day after another, and then waiting maybe to die and go to heaven, hopefully? And I think maybe the church's liturgy can be this remedy that helps us to see like, no, like time is meaningful, and it speaks beautiful things into our lives.
Yeah, like there's always something to look forward to in the church. Like there's always something, a new season that's coming. If you ever get in a funk, you know, like of that, like, oh, we're just like plateauing and everything just looks the same and feels the same. Like, but if you go back to the liturgy, like, just give it a week. Like something's coming. Like something's coming that you can prepare for. Something's coming that you can celebrate or enter into. That maybe it's going to push you to that next place. Or if you're intentional about it, and you allow the Lord to like work in that. Like He might be able to move you from here to there.
Yeah, it reminds me of, and again, the natural seasons. You know, I think even the ones I don't like as much as I age, I don't like winter as much as I used to. But I actually still look forward to it. And in the fall is my favorite season. But when winter comes finally, there's something new and fresh about just the snow on the ground. And I think we need that as human beings. Let me ask you this, Lisa. So if someone's out there and they say, that just seems to like be something that I want to do in my life, what would be like, where would you point them to start? How do they start to do this?
Yeah, well, I think it's, first of all, it's one step at a time. I think sometimes people feel overwhelmed. There's like a lot of mommy like Instagrammers and mommy blogs from like 10 years ago where these moms, you follow all of them. Yeah, understood. Totally. Right. So everyone I might suggest, you're probably like, of course, Jessica Gordon, duh. There's it can almost be overwhelming. So I think what happens is sometimes families, they're like, I want to incorporate that more, and then they get online and they search something and they see 5,000 ideas and things they should do, and they feel like they're supposed to do it all. And then all of a sudden, what's supposed to bring joy into your family is sucking joy out of your family. Because mom's stressed out because she needs to make the cream puffs for St. Joseph's feast day, and like all of a sudden, like it's completely lost its purpose. So I say the first thing is you start small. Like if you're not living Sunday the way that you would like to live Sunday, start with Sunday. If you're like, we should at least celebrate maybe Lent a little more intentionally, great, then do one thing at Lent that you haven't done before, but don't do the 5 things that you see on, Catholic icing Instagram that is just going to overwhelm you. Whatever it is, like start small, figure out what's most important to you, and realize that not everything has to be done every year. Just because you celebrated one way, 1 year, doesn't mean that you have to do that every year or else it was meaningless. I think for us, every year looks different, to be honest. There's some years where I do a really good job of celebrating my kids' name days, their feast days. And there are some days where at dinner I'm like, oh shoot, hey, cookies, everybody. Like, it's Grace's feast day. And then she's like, wait, what? Because when you're 6, it really matters. Your feast day really matters. So, I mean, you really got to choose, what makes sense for you at this time and not allow it to suck the life out of you, which can easily happen. So pick the most important things, and then it gets easier because then you already have like the supplies, or you already have the ideas, and you just pull that out again and redo it. Yeah. And so it with time, it actually gets easier to live intentionally. I
love that. And there's we've probably talked about this before. Have you read Joseph Pieper on this?
The Leisure, the Basis of Culture. Mm-hmm. Yeah. He
has a wonderful image in there I love. And he's talking about pagans. And I always think for Catholics, like, it's good to see what was good, even if there was a lot of sin and problems, obviously, in paganism. But one of the things that he talks about is Plato says that there are feast days so that human beings can stand upright. And when you just talk about your kids' like feast days, it makes me think of that, because what Plato means by this is that animals and human beings, when you have a heavy weight on your back, you look down. Mm-hmm. And what happens, I think, with all of us, and I love that, like the cream puff example, mm-hmm. is we just always have to do more. Mm-hmm. Do more. Do more, Mom. Do more, Dad. Mm-hmm. Be more available, work harder. And it can start to feel like my back's just, I'm just bending over. Mm-hmm. And Plato says that when we have a feast day, we're actually supposed to do the opposite of that. We're supposed to remember that life isn't about getting things done, but there's something deeper. There's a goodness, there's a truth out there that we're loved by God, and that the universe is actually a good place. And I think that those feast days can really help. One last question.
Hold on, can I give some resources? Because
yes,
I didn't
please.
really give those. So Kendra Tierney.
Love Kendra.
Yeah.
No, I don't know.
You're a big fan. Yeah. Catholic all year. Catholic all year. She has a really great book. If you want just like why cream puffs on St. Joseph's? What are you talking about, Lisa? Like all the histories, the recipes, the traditions. She has a ton of that in that book. If you're just like this is interesting to me. This would be so fun. She has a great book. There are a lot of books. One of my favorites is Jessica Gordon, Shower of Roses. She does a lot of liturgical stuff in her home. It's all archived on her blog, so showerofroses.blogspot.com, I believe. Really, really great one. And then Lacey from Catholic Icing has a ton of downloadable crafts and things you can print out. Now, this is all more family stuff. Like, obviously, if you're single, you're not going to go.
You might.
You just might, yeah. So those are three of my favorites. But there's something that's really neat about understanding the history, too, because the more you get into feast days, the more you realize, like, it's all Catholic. Like, all of the traditions in our society, they have a root somewhere in Catholicism. And it's super cool to realize, like, oh, that's why in this country they eat waffles on Our Lady's Day, on the Feast of the, I think it's the Annunciation, right? Like, right. There's a Catholic root to that. Like, right. So I find it fascinating. I don't know, maybe that's just like a liturgical nerd in me, but I think it's really fun.
I think, and I love it. It brings meaning in our kind of entertainment and just kind of age is filled with noise, but.
Well, and that's why in the world, like, we have to have Friendship Day and we have to have Donut Day, and not that those are bad, but we just crave that as humans.
Right.
And so if it's not going to be rooted in our church, it's going to be rooted in our secular culture, and that's what you see. That's why everybody gets so excited for these like random like sibling day. Everybody's got a post about it. I love siblings. That's great, but like, there's actually a cooler feast day going on that day, probably.
Right.
So sorry, I'll get off my.
So, do you have a website?
My blog where I documented a lot of this stuff. It's, oh gosh, I don't even know if you can access it anymore, because we stopped paying. It was Catholic Missionary Family.
Okay.
I don't think you can access it anymore. I used to. I mean, I do have madetomagnify.com is my like speaking website, which is
cool.
I do sometimes end up at family conferences talking about this stuff, which is fun. But I guess Instagram would be really like.
Okay.
I post sometimes some of the stuff we do. So.
Awesome. Well, thanks for talking with me today.
Yeah.
It's great to have you here. Thank you all for checking this out. Hope you'll take today's talk and think about how you can use the church's liturgy. So thanks for checking in. God bless. Have a great day.